I had just wrapped up one of those days that seemed to stretch endlessly, the kind that drains you not just of energy, but of willpower. Everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Emails piled up faster than I could answer them, deadlines kept shifting like sand beneath my feet, and by the time the office began to empty, I felt like I'd been hollowed out. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence, a kind of white noise that made the exhaustion sink deeper. I was slipping my laptop into my bag when a familiar voice drifted across the quiet. "Long day, Ava?" I turned and saw Adrian, the director's son. He had that easy charm that seemed to live in his smile, a warmth that made people instinctively trust him. He leaned against the doorway, jacket slung over one shoulder, looking every bit like he had stepped out of a movie scene I didn't know I was in. "Yeah," I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "I was just going to grab a cab." He tilted his head, that disarming grin tugging at his lips. "A cab? Come on, it's pouring out there. Let me give you a lift. I'm heading the same way." Something in his tone, calm, genuine, made it hard to refuse. I nodded, and a faint relief crossed his face. Outside, the city was rinsed in rain, the parking lot shimmering under streetlights like liquid glass. The air was cool, scented faintly of wet asphalt and faint blossoms from the landscape planters by the entrance. As we hurried to his car, the raindrops peppered my skin, cool and soft, like the world was exhaling around us. Inside the car, the scent of leather and something distinctly his, subtle cologne and the trace of rain, wrapped around me. The world outside blurred into streaks of gold and blue as we drove through the slick streets. We started with polite chatter, traffic, deadlines, the company's latest project. But somewhere between the red lights and the rhythm of the rain, our words began to soften. He asked about my family, my weekend rituals, the books I'd been reading. He wasn't just filling silence. He was listening, really listening, in that rare way that made me feel like my words mattered. I found myself laughing, not the polite, restrained laugh of office small talk, but the real kind, unguarded and warm. It surprised me. It had been a long time since I'd felt that light. When I glanced over, his gaze met mine for a fraction too long, and I felt something shift, small, but undeniable. The world outside the windshield shimmered, reflections of headlights dancing across the rain-slick glass, and in that quiet cocoon of motion, something unspoken passed between us. By the time he pulled up to my street, the rain had slowed to a delicate drizzle. I turned to thank him, and as I reached for the door handle, our hands brushed, a fleeting electric touch that sent a pulse through me. He smiled, the kind of smile that lingers long after it's gone, and for a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. "Good night, Ava," he said softly. "Good night, Adrian," I whispered, stepping out into the damp air. As his taillights disappeared into the misty distance, I stood on the curb for a moment, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something close to wonder. What had just happened felt too delicate to name, a moment balanced on the edge between chance and choice. That night, I lay awake, replaying every detail. The tone of his voice, the way he listened, that quiet moment before goodbye. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something alive, stirring, real. The next morning, even the light felt different. The world seemed slightly brighter, sharper, as if someone had dialed up the color on reality. Making coffee felt like a small ceremony, every sound and scent amplified by the strange energy that lingered from the night before. At work, the familiar chaos resumed, phones ringing, printers humming, footsteps echoing down the corridor, but something inside me had changed. When Adrian walked past my desk, his usual calm confidence seemed to ripple through the air. He caught my eye and smiled, and I felt that quiet spark again. Later that day during lunch, I wandered into the small cafe across the street, the one with the creaky floorboards and the smell of fresh croissants. And there he was, already at the counter. Couldn't stay away from good coffee either, he teased, stepping aside so I could order. We ended up sharing a table by the window. The conversation flowed effortlessly, slipping between humor and honesty, professional chatter and personal revelations. He told me about his travels, about losing his mother young, about the strange loneliness that sometimes crept in even when surrounded by people. I listened, feeling a kinship I hadn't expected. When we parted ways that afternoon, something wordless hung in the air, the promise of more. That evening, as I walked to my car, I felt a curious flutter of anticipation. I didn't know if I would see him again that night, but when his car pulled up beside me, I wasn't surprised. It felt almost inevitable. Need a ride? He asked, voice soft, familiar. I smiled. I thought you'd never ask. The rain had returned, steady and rhythmic against the windshield. We didn't talk much at first, but the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was alive, humming with meaning. Every so often, our eyes would meet, and I could feel my pulse quicken. At one point, I asked, "Do you ever feel like one small moment can change everything?" He glanced at me, thoughtful. All the time. Sometimes it's a word. Sometimes it's a person. The words hit deeper than I expected, and for a while, neither of us said anything else. When we reached my street, the same quiet reluctance settled in. Neither of us wanted to move, to break the moment. I turned to him, ready to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I smiled. Small, uncertain, but real. And he smiled back, like he understood exactly what I wasn't saying. Over the next few weeks, life unfolded in quiet ripples. Nothing dramatic. Just small, meaningful moments that began to stitch themselves into the fabric of my days. A passing smile across the conference room. A joke shared during a late meeting. A text at midnight that simply said, "Can't sleep. You?" Each moment felt ordinary on its own, but together, they built something extraordinary, something fragile but deeply alive. One Friday, as twilight bled into a soft indigo haze, I was gathering my things when he appeared at the door again. "Mind if I walk you out?" "Not at all," I said, and together we stepped into the evening. The city smelled like rain and fresh beginnings. Streetlights glowed like amber halos on the wet pavement. For a while, we just walked. No destination, no agenda, our steps finding an easy rhythm. At my car, we paused. "Do you ever think," he said quietly, "that maybe the universe throws people together at just the right moment?" I looked up at him, rainlight reflecting in his eyes. I think sometimes it knows exactly what we need, even when we don't. He smiled, slow and sincere. "Yeah, I think so too." That night's ride was quiet, almost reverent. The city blurred past us in soft motion, lights bending through raindrops on the glass. When he stopped in front of my house, I turned to him and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For making the world feel different." He looked at me, really looked. And for the first time, I saw something unguarded in his expression. "You've done the same for me," he said. When I stepped out, the air was cool and fragrant with rain. I stood there for a long moment after he drove away, watching the soft shimmer of headlights fade into the distance. That night, I understood something I hadn't before, that connection doesn't always announce itself with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life, like rain through an open window, gentle but impossible to ignore. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm between us deepened. There was no rush, no labels, just a steady current that carried us forward. Every conversation left me a little more open. Every glance felt a little longer. One evening, he waited outside my office holding an umbrella. "Thought I'd save us from another soaking?" he said with a grin. We shared the umbrella on the short walk to his car, shoulders brushing, laughter threading through the sound of rain. In the soft glow of the streetlights, the world felt slowed, cinematic, like a moment that wanted to be remembered. Once inside, the rain drummed lightly on the roof as he drove through winding streets. "You know," he said after a while, "I've been thinking about that night. The first time I offered you a ride. It's strange how something so small can change the shape of everything that comes after." I smiled faintly. Maybe it wasn't small at all. Maybe it was the start of something neither of us expected. He nodded, eyes flicking toward me for a second that felt like an eternity. "Maybe you're right. We didn't need to say more." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every unspoken thing that lived between us. When he stopped at my house, neither of us moved immediately. The street was washed in silver light, puddles reflecting the moon. "I'm glad this happened," he said softly. "All of it. So am I whispered. And for a long moment, time seemed to stand still. Just the sound of rain, the slow rhythm of breath, the quiet hum of something new and beautiful taking root. When I finally stepped out and closed the door, The sound of it felt final and yet full of promise. I stood there, watching his car disappear down the street, heartful not of longing but of peace. That night, as I sat by my window with a cup of tea, watching the city breathe beneath the rain, I thought about how life rarely unfolds the way we plan it. Sometimes it's quieter, slower, more intricate, like a song that plays softly in the background until you realize